it's a federal election, why are you involving them with state? That is exactly why, is we wanted them to be here to be able to respond to that kind of question. Okay, I believe we've got a question from someone on nuclear power.
Yes, that's me. Many of the people on the panel have said that climate change is important. We need to switch over to a different sort of energy source. Other people have said, no, that's crap. We should have coal-fired power stations. How come nobody, or seemingly nobody on the panel, supports nuclear power?
Emerald.
Nuclear power.
Yeah, I do.
I can't pretend to be an expert on nuclear power, I have to say that. But I do know that from my understanding is we just haven't found a way that we can ensure that the waste that is produced will be safe. And I don't think that it's worth taking that risk when the science is there for renewables, and why would we invest in something that we know can have really catastrophic effects for our health down the line when we could invest in something that can be clean and reliable?
Okay, thank you. I think Laurel wants to address that.
Yeah, disposal of nuclear waste is done safely all over the world and has been for decades. Australia is a very vast continent. There are plenty of places where we could store nuclear waste as they are storing nuclear waste in Europe. I think we face an environmental catastrophe looming as to how we store disused solar panels and batteries. They are extremely damaging to the environment once their use-by date is gone. I just think, as I said in my remarks at the start, that if we really believed that climate change or that human emissions were destroying the planet, and we want to preserve the modern industrialised economy and the lifestyle that we all enjoy, and the ability to continue to bring people out of poverty, particularly in developing nations, then we would go to a nuclear industry. Zero emissions. There are safe ways to store the byproducts, the nuclear waste, but there aren't safe ways necessarily to dismantle and get rid of old solar panels and batteries. So that's a looming environmental catastrophe. So I just think there's a lot of irrationality in the debate. And yes, I'll be quite upfront. I am not convinced that carbon dioxide emissions are causing the planet to warm.
The question is on nuclear power, so we'll move on. Thank you.
Okay.
I think we've got a question from Justin.
Hello. Yes. My question relates to to everyone sitting there today, and it involves climate change, cows, the sun, the moon, and what's happening in the Amazon jungle. So starting with the Christian Democrats at the far end and coming around to the Liberal Democrats, like if we could just do it down the line quickly. What's your favourite chocolate cake?
Lyle,
I don't think that's a silly question.
your favourite chocolate cake?
I'm happy to let that pass, I think.
Come on, Lyle.
I'm with the Australian Conservatives too,
Don't be
by the
shy,
way.
son. Let's go.
Well, tiramisu.
Thank you. Brandon,
Chocolate cheesecake.
Karame,
A vegan chocolate cake?
Shane, favourite chocolate cake?
Look, if you're going to do chocolate cake, lace it with rum.
I'm a chocolate muffin man, but I'll hand over to Emerald.
One made entirely of solar panels. No, I'm partial to a cookies and cream sort of chocolate cake, like an Oreos. Does that count as chocolate?
Darren?
Oh, this is politics, so it's got to be a mud cake.
Oh, nice. Nice. Andrew?
Lamingtons.
Lovely. Yeah.
Well, the best kind, and yeah, aside from vegan, obviously the one that's laced with cannabis.
Big round of applause, folks. Come on, that was good. I believe we've got a question from Ryan McKenzie.
Hi, sorry, for the Animal Justice Party. I too am a licensed firearm owner, and you did pests in inverted commas. So down in other states of the country, they safely hunt feral pests in our national parks and state forests. So I don't really see why there's an issue of that in Queensland. But I'm just questioning why you did pests in inverted commas, because we have bovine, feral horses, feral camels, pigs, which outnumber people now in Australia. We have foxes, cats, dogs, and rabbits. So what did you mean by pests?
Thank you for the question. Oh, thank you for the question. So pests, we don't use the word pests, one, we're the Animal Justice Party, so we need to be looking at innovative ways that we can manage animals that have been introduced to this country. Shooting is completely now outdated. We just do it because it's seen as... No, absolutely not. 1080, absolutely. So for anyone who doesn't know, 1080 is a poison that's used, and it has a horrific death for the animals that ingest it. So no, we're definitely, obviously, not for poison. We're the Animal Justice Party. But we need to be looking at innovations that other countries are using now, especially like trap and neuter and release are doing really well in other countries.
Excuse me, can we just have a bit of politeness while she responds to that?
Just so you know, we're actually not shooting 30 million pigs either. So that is not working. So that's what I'm saying. The current system of going into parks and into wild places and shooting animals currently isn't working, because we have 30 million pigs, as you just mentioned. So why do we continue to do the same thing when other countries are actually looking at great innovations that we can use and that we should be implementing? And there's lots of money in this. There's lots of money in managing these animals, and the current system isn't working, because if it was, we wouldn't have 30 million pigs.
Okay, I think Shane wanted to respond to that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the answer. We're not like any other country for a start. We're a great brown land. We're the great southern land. Let me give you a personal experience. I'm from Western Australia. Now, the northwest, I've had personal experience with a lot of friends up there who own cattle properties, 1.18 million acres on the edge of the Great Sandy Desert, had to close down their beef industry for 3 years because camels came in off the Great Sandy Desert between Alice Springs and them with tuberculosis. Now, tuberculosis introduced into the cattle, quarantined the whole place for 3 years, had to digest all their cattle stock and then rebuild after the 3-year period. Absolutely decimated their industry and their livelihoods. Our solution, the only one we had, how are you going to humanely cull 200 to 500 camels that you see roaming in a herd? Personally, I went out there with my two friends that I grew up with primary school who now run that station, and I personally shot 80 camels with a 308. Seriously, I put the gun down at the end of the day and I said, take me home for a beer, I'm done, right? Tell me how we're supposed to do that.
Thank you.
That ain't going to happen. Humanely what? No. Oh, no, it worked all right. We shot them all dead.
Alrighty, I think we've had enough questions on guns. Does anyone in the audience have a question relating to local events? Most things that we've covered so far have been pretty broad-reaching. Do we have a question on anything local? Lady here has got her hand up.
Thank you. My question's about Toondah Harbour, since that's local. What makes the government feel that it's okay to authorise something where a private company, is going to make a fortune out of public land and public waterways? And not only are they going to make a fortune out of it, building all these buildings, at the same time they're going to destroy Ramsar-listed wetlands, and they're also going to probably ruin the harbour, because the harbour itself, although it does need an upgrade, what they're going to design is very much like what's already been done overseas, and the water became extremely stagnant, locked in those canals, and stunk so badly that they had to completely redo it. It's a very poor design, what they're actually doing.
Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Damien. And this will be slightly longer because it's a complex answer. As the decision maker, the federal government, I haven't been making terribly strong observations about this development, but I certainly believe it should be fully assessed environmentally, and that should take at least 18 months to do. We've just embarked on that process, and I won't be politically interfering in it as it goes along. An EIS is a massive pile of documents. It's submitted to PhDs in Canberra, and you know what? Those PhDs in Canberra have no compulsion with saying no. They've already done it twice. They're not bought off. They're not bought off because a political party takes a donation. This is a great nation that's had donations forever and a day. And this assumption that because you get donations, therefore the politicians are corrupt, is not only patently ridiculous, it's completely unsubstantiated. Well, you've got to have some evidence for those kind of accusations that you throw around. Those PhDs in Canberra do not mind saying no. They've done it twice already. And like any person lodging an application, if the decision maker says, I'm inclined to say no, you withdraw your application and you can submit a smaller one. I mean, that's what's happened twice. Now, regardless of your views, I respect them. If you're madly in favour, I'll tell you the case against. If you're madly against it, I'll tell you the argument for. But there's one thing I'm not going to do. As a trained scientist, I'm going to let those people in Canberra do their job. And running around trying to spread fake news that the science has already done is completely wrong. There's tons of scientists out there. There's thousands of scientists out there, but no one has studied the proposition. The scientists study the impact of a development on 50 hectares out of 150,000 hectares. I live in a city where I can count on one hand the number of places you can eat a meal on a plate and see water. I'm not going to lock up this city and say you can never so much as touch one mangrove. I'm going to say if a state government says you can have 500 metres of already degraded port, and tell us what your dream, what you can do there to make it something that's world-class infrastructure, that the world can land at the airport, come to this beautiful city and be in the Gold Coast by nightfall. I want that economy for my city. I'm not saying I'm in favour or against. I'm saying give the scientists, I know you're shaking your head, the science hasn't been done. And you think it has been because you know how many birds there are. You need to know what the bird does in response to the proposition. Animals are adaptable, right? They land in different places. We need to know how many of these birds land in this particular area, whether it's 4 or 21 out of 1,500 land in that area. I'm not saying yes or no, but give the science a chance, because in the end, as you people say, you can't argue against the science.
Okay, thank you. Emerald?
Okay.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Can Emerald respond to that?
All right. So, can you all hear me? Yeah. I've talked about Toondah Harbour a lot during this campaign, and that's because it's really emblematic of a lot of issues that I am hearing about again and again and again. One of those issues is the systematic misuse of PDAs to trample over community needs and to prioritise developer profit over what the community is asking for and what's going to be good for the environment as well. The second is the failure, the abject failure of our federal environmental laws. And when Andrew sits here and says that he will, that this is going to be thoroughly assessed, and that the people assessing it through these EPBC laws will be, doing a thorough job, and they'll be free to say no. The fact is that 99% of proposals that go through these laws end up approved. That doesn't sound like a thorough assessment to me. It's clear that these laws are simply broken. And in relation to these public servants being able to say no, they already said no, and the minister ignored their advice. The Department of Environmental Science, Federal Department of Environmental Science, experts in that department determined that this development, 3,600 apartments on internationally protected wetlands, for anyone who's not aware, would irreversibly damage the wetlands and irreversibly damage habitat for the critically endangered eastern curlew. And they gave that advice to the minister and said that this project should absolutely, under no circumstances, go ahead. He, after receiving $200,000 from Walker Corporation, the developer, turned around and said, ignore that advice and moved on to the next stage of approval, which is this environmental impact statement. So the idea that those donations are not influencing that decision and that the experts really have final say in this matter it's not supported by the facts. And yeah, I mean, I think that I did want to make the point though that the other thing that this project is emblematic of is the fact that we have a really strong community here that will stand up for their rights to have a say in what goes on in this community. On Friday I was talking to a local resident, Esme, who was in her 90s, and in the mid-80s she was fighting another development at this exact site, and they had thousands and thousands of signatures on a petition from locals asking that it not go ahead, and the Attorney General of the government of the day said that it wouldn't, and they promised that it would never happen again. But here we are now, and that's why it tells me that we need to fix these issues that are causing things like this to even get this far. Our broken environmental laws, political donations that are corrupting our democracy, and a planning system that puts developer profit before community need and the environment.
I will come back to you, Andrew, but we do have a lawyer here on the panel. Brandon?
Yeah, yes, I've been a lawyer for 12 years, but I've also been a Redlands local for 30 years, so I'm well aware of the Toondah Harbour development, and in my opinion, it is overdevelopment. We don't need this. We don't need this here. In regards to the payments from property developers, the High Court recently upheld the ruling that property developer donations to political parties should be banned. So hopefully that will spread across the country, but don't know yet. Hopefully that will spread to the other states. Now, in regards to there being no corruption in Canberra, I'd like to believe that, but I'd also be wanting a federal ICAC to make sure, that just to be on the safe side, that we know that's happening for sure.
Okay. 10-minute warning on the bar. I believe we have a question on koalas.
We've lost 80% of our koalas in the last 20 years.
Is there any way we can get that a bit louder, because we can't hear you?
We've lost 80% of Southeast Queensland's koalas in the past 20 years. Southeast Queensland is the 7th worst deforestation zone on the globe. If you are voted in, what will your party be doing to close the gaps of the federal laws, environmental laws, to stop this land clearing and save our koalas?
Shane?
I'll bring back my previous comment. I'm only a candidate. I'm not in Canberra. I can't look at this legislation and see how it all works. But I'll give you indication. When I was growing up on my property, we had salinity problems. We addressed this and that was because our forefathers before us cut all the trees down. So the water table rises, it brings the salt to the surface. We addressed this issue by getting backhoes in and digging 8-foot trenches right through the whole river line and the saline lines. And then on the edges of that saline line, we planted salt-bearing trees. Now this is back in 82, 83, right? So, and then we went on a massive tree planting campaign around because we're a sheep property, you know, and we went on a massive tree plantings. So can we crop? Can we have agriculture? And can we have diversified portfolios of our industries? Yeah, we can. It just takes, look, humans create problems, humans can fix the problems. It's simple, you know. We can cut down trees, not old growth forests, and we can do plantings that benefit both urban areas, rural areas, and areas that we live in systematically. It's not hard. I've seen it in the city areas now where wildlife and humans coexist with each other. I've seen it down the Gold Coast a few weeks ago, where I'm sitting on the 17th floor of the apartment I rented down there, and we had multiple bird life come and visit us on that apartment because they were living in the local tree lines and that around in that area. So we can do it. We can bring back, and yes, let's do more plantings. Let's plant more trees. The more oxygen we put into the atmosphere, the better. Absolutely.
Thank you. Karen May?
Thanks for the question, and I'll actually answer the question. The federal government needs to be the leader